Welcome to FOBtv, the future of business. I'm Kevin Benedict, your host, and I want to welcome each of you here today. Now, I'm really excited to introduce this series. Let me tell you how we put it together real quick. We did a big virtual event here at TCS, and this event was called Reimagining Higher Education in the University of the Future. We invited 4 virtual panelists to participate. We asked them all the same 5 questions. Now, in the virtual event, because of the time limitation, we couldn't go through the entire interview with each of these. We had to select which ones we were going to have answer each of the questions. But in this series, we're going to systematically go through all 4 of their entire interviews so you get the value of their insight and experience. So these 4 panelists represent 3 different countries, 4 different entities or organizations, and 3 different universities. So we have a representative from Oxford University, Cornell Tech, and the University of Toronto, in addition to the giant educational publishing company, Wiley. So let's get started. Episode 1 is with Susan McCahan. She's the Vice Provost, Innovations for Undergraduate Education and Academic Programs at the University of Toronto. So I hope you enjoy this. Listen to her insight. She's brilliant. And stay tuned for the other 3 interviews so you can get the value of their insight as well. Thank you for joining. In the next part of our program, we have a fireside chat. We're going to be talking about the University of Tomorrow and the role of technology. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us in this fireside chat. Susan, let's start with you. Thank you again for joining us. We're so excited to just brainstorm and hear your insights from the industry of higher education. So the first question for you, Susan, is universities have been involved in digital transformation journeys for actually a long time already. How do you think the pandemic is going to change the path or the trajectory that universities are already on that digital transformation journey?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think we were on that journey, and it was we were moving very strategically and with a lot of thought and intention. The pandemic obviously has pushed us way beyond our strategic direction in this field. And so we have found ourselves, of course, as an almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively online institution this year. I think that is going to jump us to a different place. We're going to leapfrog perhaps some of the work we would have been doing sort of slowly. It will accelerate us into a new place, into a new paradigm. But I also think we are going to revisit what parts of the in-person activity we really value. And so I see us swinging back into in-person, but back into a very different kind of in-person perhaps than we would have had if we sort of moved there slowly and intentionally. And so I'm looking forward to what is coming next, because I think it will take us to a very different place that we would have gotten to trajectory that we had been on.
Susan, another question that I keep hearing about is how will universities continue to provide that university experience when more and more classes are moving online? I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different leaders in higher education, and they always emphasize how important parents and students feel about that university experience. So how do you address that challenge?
Sure. So as I said, I think we're moving to a different paradigm where we will still see the vast majority of our undergraduate programs being delivered in person. The strategy that we had before the pandemic, just to get into that a little bit, was that our online courses were really intended to enrich and increase flexibility in our undergraduate programs. So that meant having large first-year courses, second-year introductory courses online, so that were an online option, so that students could more easily fit them into their schedules. They could get through those prerequisites and move on to the electives. And many of the upper year, smaller elective courses in person, right? We also produce a number of very niche courses that are only offered online because it allows us to get the enrollment that we need in order to put on that course. So for example, we teach Sanskrit 1 and 2 in online because that allows us to draw enrollment from not only across the university, but from other universities as well. So I see us moving back to that kind of mix, but I also think that we're going to see much more in the way of hybrid courses. That is, courses that are traditional in-person courses, but now the in-person becomes a different kind of experience, and some of the information transmission, more of the sort of content delivery moves to the online setting. So I think we're going to see a significant increase in hybrid courses that we teach across our undergrad. At the grad level, it's different. These are students who don't necessarily want to drop what they're doing to come to campus for an experience. They have lives. They have an identity that's already fully developed, families, connections. They are situated in a community. And so I think we are going to see an acceleration in the growth of things like online professional master's degrees and so on, and particularly bridging kinds of degrees, certificates, diplomas that go from an undergraduate program to an industry-specific skill set.
So Susan, let's brainstorm here together. What is the campus, the university campus, going to look like if we look forward into the future? What's the future of a university campus with these new models we've all been talking about here?
So that's a really interesting question. We actually just opened a new building on campus about a year before the pandemic hit. And this new building is designed from bottom to top for collaborative learning. It's all about bringing students and faculty and researchers together to work collaboratively. So I think we're going to see fewer and fewer large-scale lecture room type facilities being built. I think we're going to see more of these kinds of large-scale collaboratories and collaboration spaces being built. Our largest collaborative learning classroom now seats 460 students, but they are in tables, they are not in rows, and it's designed effectively for a flipped or inverted classroom model where the students are, again, getting the content outside of class and coming into class for that collaborative active learning. I think we're going to see more of that happening and reimagining what happens on campus around that social networking, the social construction of understanding that I think was always part of our campus and will become more part of our campus. And also for our students, again, is that exploration of professional identity, exploration of social identity, of political identity, that is really important part of the university experience for them.
So Susan, one of the results of the pandemic, of course, is that we're all talking on Zoom and virtually, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different university professors and leaders over the last 3 weeks, in fact. And one of the questions that really is kind of the big question out there: how might universities have to change their purpose, their operating models, and just their business models even? How might these kinds of impacts like the pandemic impact just really everything to do with the university? Let's talk about that.
Yes, I think we're still figuring that out, of course. And it becomes increasingly important that we're connected beyond the university walls to the communities that we're situated in. And that includes both community organizations and companies that are situated in our vicinity. Because increasingly we are seeing the university as a hub, but a very porous hub with the community that we are situated in. And so how do we enable more and more of that cross work to happen, those tighter connections to community organizations and companies? That means that when the student is coming to our campus, they are coming here really not just to be on campus, but to be part of that network that extends off campus. Part of what was happening, it's becoming increasingly, I think, part of the way accelerated in the pandemic.
Where do you see, Susan, the technology gaps between where we need to be in higher education, let's say 5 to 10 years from now, and where we actually are today? Where are those gaps, and what are we going to need to fill to get there?
So I think some of the gaps are in the facilities that we have. We started very rapidly to try and fill in some of those gaps once the pandemic hit. We've been adding things like simulcasting into our traditional lecture rooms that will allow us to actually teach courses globally, not just locally, so that students can be both here and elsewhere simultaneously in the same class, right? And so I expect that we will see more and more of our classrooms with this type of simulcast capability. But I also think that we need to improve educational technology. Educational technology still feels, in many cases, a little clunky compared to the kinds of technology that have enormous investment going into them in other realms of our lives. I have sometimes said, I feel like when I'm teaching my class, it's like teaching through a drinking straw. There is a lack of sense of presence, even when we are teaching on Zoom or Teams or Collaborate or one of the many platforms that we now have available to us. There is a lack of immediacy to it. And immediacy is an educational term that means that ability to kind of read the room and read how your students are engaging with you in a classroom. And the technologies as they currently exist have sort of artificially tried to build in immediacy, but we're not quite there yet. And so I think there's a long way we can go from where we are to the kind of technology, systems, infrastructure that will allow us to do this very effectively with students in class and outside of the campus together in learning environments.
So, Susan, as you are talking about that and sharing your insight, my mind was saying, boy, the data that's going to need to be stored and packaged and the IP around that and everything to do, because you're probably going to want to package the best of your classes so you can show them every semester or quarter or whatever the framework will be. But all these different things that go with it: data storage, cloud storage, more capacity in broadband, more cameras, more everything involved in that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the people that go with it, educational technologists, really good educational technologists are a field that is relatively new and hard to find. And what I mean by that is that our educational technologists, and we probably have over 100 of them here at our university, the ones that are really valuable go beyond knowing the technology, and they know the pedagogy. They have an understanding of teaching and learning that allows them to inform instructors and work in a teaching team. And I think this is one of the big changes we're going to see on campuses, is a move from an individual instructor walking in and teaching as a private person in a room with a group of students, and it's a very private kind of an enterprise, to team teaching, and not just team teaching with other instructors, but teaming up with librarians who are information specialists, educational technologists who also understand pedagogy, and are, of course, our teaching assistants who are our graduate students who work with us. And so increasingly, we are going to see interprofessional teams that bring different expertise to that teaching enterprise and really enrich it, because they bring different perspectives. And I think that's going to be one of the big changes that we see. And that will include people who are experts at accessibility services and accommodations, to help us design courses around universal design principles for broad accessibility, a whole variety of people who will inform instructors and help us design the best possible courses. So that team teaching concept, I think, was happening again, being accelerated through the pandemic.
So, Susan, we've got a couple questions that have come in. The first question here is, will the impact of the pandemic be just short-term or long-term at universities?
I think it has moved us from one place, really jumped to another. And so I think there's a hysteresis here. We're not going to go back to where we were after this is over. We are going to go back to a very different place, I think. And part of it simply is there are instructors who are discovering who would never have engaged in online learning, and they are learning how to do it. They are learning how to do it well, and they are enjoying parts of it. I think there are still areas that are hugely challenging, like assessment. We have not fully figured out online assessment very well, but there are areas like that conversation with students where actually some instructors are finding that they can have more engagement in certain ways with their students. And so they now have that choice to keep those parts that are working well, go back to things that worked better in person, think intentionally about how to do that. They've redesigned their course entirely for this year. They are now in a position to redesign it again, to go back in a way that's different because they can bring elements from that online experience. So I think we're going to see something different for many courses, not all courses, but for many courses, I think there will be an opportunity for instructors to pick and choose the parts that they feel worked really well in this environment right now.
A second question that came in, Susan, where might the competition of the future come from?
We don't necessarily think about it as competition. We think of it as opportunities for collaboration. And I think we're going to see more and more companies getting into online learning and just learning in general. They've always been in learning, but now they also are seeing opportunities to engage their employees and potential employees in a new way. And so I think we're going to see more opportunity to collaborate with industry in this. I think we're also going to see more opportunity to collaborate with social benefit organizations because social benefit organizations are going to begin to understand that education is a way to connect with people. And by connecting with those people and through universities, we already do quite a bit of community-based learning. This is going to, I think, bring another dimension to community-based learning. And so, again, increasing that kind of porosity and connection. And it doesn't necessarily now, of course, have to be immediate. It can be in the wider world because people are getting used to video conferencing and are understanding what the value of that can be if you don't all have to fly to the same place at the same time. I see opportunities for that. I think in terms of competitiveness, we are going to continue to focus on high quality, excellent education in a very wide range of fields and stay nimble around the fields that we offer because there are going to be out of this new fields emerging and we need to identify those quickly and move into those areas because there will be, I think, demand. And interest in research in those areas as well.
Susan, thank you for your insights today. And I want to thank all of the panelists, Susan, Renee, Greg, and Mark, for joining us today and sharing both their experiences and their insights. Thank you.